and basically chiming in anytime she would like to. So, Heidi, can you go ahead and launch our first poll? I'd like to gauge the interest of our audience before we get started.
I sure can. In our poll that we are getting started with, we're asking, which section of today's presentation are you looking to learn the most about? Could it be marketing? Maybe it's about selling. Are you looking to retain flood policies? Or are you just looking for some darn good resources? We have quite a bit of people who are actually answering that, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it open for just a little bit longer because our responses are coming quickly.
Fast and furious.
Fast and furious today.
Yeah, it's a pretty good spread, too. I'm going to roll on to the first slide and just start looking at the objectives while people continue to answer those questions. And curiously enough, our objectives are exactly those 4 areas. So we're going to start off talking about marketing and marketing plans and how to develop those. We'll move on and talk about the details of selling, and then we're going to touch a little on retention, and we'll have some resources for you too.
So, Terry, I ended our poll, and we are definitely pretty much an even split.
Wow.
Really, the top winner is going to be selling, but it only won by just a couple of votes. So I think all 4 are going to be kind of helpful for us today.
That's perfect. We'll cover all of those areas for you all. All right. Let's get started. Let's move right into marketing. Well, the first thing you want to do when you start off with marketing is you'll want to identify marketing opportunities if you want to market a product or service. So all of the events that you see above here are things that can cause flooding. So heavy winter rains, snow melt. We sell a lot of flood insurance out in Colorado, don't we, Heidi? That snow melt can be a real killer in the spring. Monsoon season, I don't know, that maybe is in Arizona. Your wildfires out in the West. You know, people don't think about this, but after wildfires, flooding can be really prevalent then because it burns off all of the underbrush, and which is preventing the water from running down those hills, and flooding can be a big event after that. So hurricanes. I live in Houston, Texas, so I know a little about those. Levees and dams can be a source of flooding, and then, of course, tropical storms, which we also get in Houston area. So those are some areas that you'll want to look at as opportunities. Now, I know these are disasters, and we're looking at them as opportunities, but, you know, unfortunately for flooding, that's what we're looking at is disasters. So, you know, they should know, all customers should be informed that there's a risk and that it's not covered on most homeowners' policies, and they should know the value that policy can provide should they have a loss. Of course, people who live in a community that's experienced flooding recently are more likely to buy, but you should know that 98% of U.S. counties have been impacted by some flooding event at one time or another. An average flood claim is about $43,000, and the average flood insurance premium is about $700. And you know that those averages really vary from place to place. The average during Hurricane Harvey in Houston was much higher than $43,000 because of the area that it hit. But these are the overall national, and you'll find those at the bottom where it says FEMA's data visualization tool. If you go to that link, you'll find those statistics there, so that can help you when you're looking at your marketing plan. Moving on to the next thing you'll want to do is create a marketing plan. So you have to figure out what your goals are first and how much money you plan to spend. Money's not unlimited for most people. You'll want to identify your target customers and then determine how you're going to measure success. That's really important. A lot of people don't think about that, but you'll need to think about what kind of response you're looking for so that you know if it was successful and know if you maybe want to do it again. So you'll see three areas here that you'll want to look at. Of course, the easy targets are the ones in the high-risk areas because they have to buy if they have a lender. But keep in mind that they may already have a flood policy, so what you may be trying to do is get it away from another agent. So even if they don't have a lender, if they live in a high-risk zone, they really need to look at flood unless they can afford to self-insure. So, but don't forget the preferred risk areas. Those are the areas where people are told they're not in a flood zone, although they are. It's a lower risk flood zone, but there are no zero risk flood zones, and people should be aware that their homeowners policies will probably not cover that. And so those are things that you might want to address in your marketing campaigns. So when you create your marketing plan, you'll want to time your plan in accordance with your marketing opportunities. So is it hurricane season or wildfire season or snow melt season? Remember, most of the time there's a 30-day wait for coverage to start. So you make sure your marketing information mentions that and allows time before the season starts for that 30-day wait. So, for instance, hurricane season, because that's what I know, hurricane season starts June 1st. So you'd probably want to get your marketing out by at least the end of April to allow customer time to buy it and have it in place by June 1st. So there's only two exceptions to that 30-day wait. The first is if they're closing on a loan, in which case the 30-day wait can be waived if the policy is effective on or before the date of closing. And the second is if there's a map change, in which case there's only a one-day wait, providing that they purchase the coverage within 13 months of the effective date of the map change. So, and a map change can be a very good opportunity too. So you need to look at those things. Moving on in creating your marketing plan, you'll want to find the channels to reach your target audience. You could use local newspapers or television or radio stations, direct mail or community flyers, social media, agency website messaging. And you'll want to pick that channel according to the audience you plan to target. For instance, if you're trying to reach a younger audience or maybe tech-savvy professionals, you're probably not going to use the local newspapers because those age groups and those people generally don't read the newspapers unless they read it online, but often not even then. So you'll want to choose other channels for those people. So I've seen examples of agents using any or all of these with varying degrees of success. I've had some agents that have had little local radio station blurbs that they do, little kind of a mini talk show, but also social media being very important these days to use. Another part of creating your marketing plan is to find partners. Build a network of friends. You know, a lot of agents try to market to realtors, and I've seen them, they somehow think that if they drop a box of donuts off at the realtor's office, that's going to, with their card, that's going to lead to a bunch of business. But I'm telling you, that's not the way to go. I hear that from realtors often. So in working with groups like realtors, lenders, homeowners association, financial advisors, you need to show them that you are their expert and show them how you'll help them accomplish their goals, which is to sell business. So it's also a good idea to get to know your local floodplain manager and community officials. If they know they can depend on you and you are the local flood guy or flood gal, meaning the expert in the area, they may send business or other opportunities your way, like being a speaker or participant at some event or a position on a committee. They may also keep you regularly informed when things are changing in your community. You know, think of ways some of these people may be able to send customers or maybe just information your way and how you can tap into that. I saw an agent who attended a FEMA flood map change meeting one time, and he made himself stand out by asking some really good questions, and he had some very good back and forth with the speaker in that. And it became very clear that he knew a lot about flood. And so after the meeting, I saw a lot of people that had attended from the community gather around him, and he was passing out cards. So those kinds of things can be really good opportunities for you to tap into a network. Keep that in mind.
So, Terry, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second.
Sure.
And give you kind of some examples that I have heard agents using. For example, in my particular area, I had an agent who would contact right at kind of the beginning of the year when homeowners associations are really looking at their insurance policies. She would go ahead and contact the homeowners associations, give them their card, and specifically bring up some knowledge about flood insurance. And so when the topic of flood insurance came up, they always knew that she was someone who could answer their questions for that. I've also heard of some agents who will attend, if their area is remapping, who will attend some of the town hall meetings that they have and really start to hand out their business cards to the potential policyholder so that they have a contact just to, if they have any type of flood questions. So there's just a lot of different ways to get your name out there, and you can be as creative as you want. And Terry is going to kind of give you some resources and kind of a basis as we go on to kind of give you some different ideas. And I also wanted to remind you that since we do have your phones muted, if you have some questions, go ahead and type them on the chat line, and we'll make sure that we are answering whatever you need, or if there's a specific topic you want to make sure we discuss, that we can do that.
Absolutely.
And now I'll stop interrupting you, Terry.
You interrupt anytime you like, Heidi. That was valuable information. It made me think of one thing, too. I talk to floodplain managers fairly often because sometimes if I'm going to visit an area, I'll call the floodplain manager and ask them what's going on in their areas. And let me tell you, they know who the people are locally that are the agents that are interested in flood. They'll tell me names. And so it's a really good idea to tap into those things, any and all of those things, to try to get your name out there and become that person for your community. So our next objective is selling. Let's move on to that. The first step in selling is to identify clients. So I'm often asked by agents, sometimes I visit agents, and I'm often asked how they can bring in new clients for flood. And what I usually do is just look at their file cabinets and ask them if they have a flood policy in every homeowner's file in that cabinet. Now, that's not usually what they want to hear because they're looking for some magic new plan that they've never heard of. But honestly, your best bet and the warmest leads are your existing clients. You know, one thing we should realize is the largest asset most people will ever own in their lives is their home. The things that can affect that asset are things like fire and flood and theft and liability, and presumably you're covering them for 3 of those with their homeowner's policy. But why are you leaving out one major event? Have you decided that they're not going to flood? Don't make that decision for them. Offer a flood quote as a part of every new business quote or at their annual review. I hope you're doing an annual review with your customers. So as I mentioned before, low risk does not mean no risk. Don't be that agent who has a grown man sitting in their chair in front of you sobbing because they've lost their house to flooding and you didn't offer them a flood policy. You know, let the insured make that decision. So it's best to quote them every time because, you know, in a high-risk area, they may ask you for the quote most of the time because their lender's going to require it. But if they don't and they're in a low-risk area, a lot of times they just don't realize how cheap that is. So it's a really good idea to actually give them a quote and then have them sign a waiver and reject it if they don't want to buy. That waiver is going to help protect you from future lawsuits because I've seen that happen. And it may help them think twice before rejecting it. So in other words, it's a good sales tool to get people to think about it instead of just tuning you out. When they have to sign something, they tend to think they're supposed to read it and think about it, and so they may give a second thought to it. On our website, once you've completed the quote, if you look in that same box down in the right-hand corner, you'll see something that says quote summary / waiver. There's a little button there. If you click on that, this really nice quote summary comes up, and it has the waiver down at the bottom. So I've seen agents use that very effectively. They'll present the homeowners. They'll present it as, here's the homeowners part of your policy. Here's the flood part of your policy, as if that is one decision, not two. And I've seen them use that quite effectively. So that's a thought for you. Okay. Also, in identifying your clients, you'll want to understand the flood risk for their area. Make sure you know what's going on with the maps and recent flooding in that area. And as I said earlier, make friends with the floodplain manager, because they can tell you about what's going on with that. You know, and a lot of them want to do outreach. You may be able to get the floodplain manager to come and speak with a group that you deal with, like realtors, and that's especially helpful if there's any kind of map changes going on or there's been recent flooding, and they can talk about the plans your community has for future flooding. But if nothing else, if there's just been some recent flooding, you might not know about it, and your floodplain manager can tell you that, and that becomes a good marketing opportunity and helps you identify the needs your clients have. Also, in identifying your clients, you may want to become, as I said, the flood guy or flood gal in your area. In other words, you want to become the go-to flood resource in that area. So talk to your partners and find out what they need from you as their flood resource. Your goal should be to help them sell business by getting them correct information, getting it for them quickly, helping protect their customers, and making them generally look good. And that will cause them to refer business to you. So, in identifying your clients, you also want to be able to answer some of the more common questions that home buyers have. So look over some of these questions. How much is this going to cost? How much coverage should I buy? What kind of risks do I have? That sort of thing. And if you don't already know all the answers to these questions, you might want to check out our webinar schedule on the website. We have other webinars that can assist you. We have one coming up on October 10th, the Flood 101. That's more for beginners. Starts off with the terminology, helps you become familiar with the basics of flood. We have one on November 12th that deals with basements and elevated structures, but we have these ongoing. Also, you might want to check out our training library on the website, because there are some past webinars kind of in canned form that are self-paced. You can start and stop them whenever you want on different subjects. And lastly, if you go to nationalfloodservices.com and look under NFS Elevate, you will see an option for Educate. On there, there's a lot of short subject videos that can help you answer a lot of those questions, and we're adding more all the time. They're 2 to 5 minutes maybe on lots of different subjects. So, you know, go through those and see if any of those are helpful in helping you become the flood expert.
Terry, before you go on to the next screen, Sandy had a really good question that kind of deals in this particular topic.
Okay.
And Sandy's question was, how do we find out who the floodplain manager is in your area? I am going to paste a link in your those are fire manager assistants. Sorry about that. I'm going to paste a couple of links in your chat line, and these are going to help you find where your regional offices are for the NFIP. You can start there. The regional NFIP office has a ton of resources that are pretty good. Terry, do you have any other suggestions when you're finding your local? I know that you do that quite a bit.
Yes, I do. Honestly, I usually just Google floodplain manager for that area, and I just call them. A good place to start when you're talking to your community is find out where you would go for that particular community to get a permit, a building permit. And that's a good place to start. Usually it's a courthouse or someplace. And if you call there and tell them you want to talk to somebody about flood or flood information, generally the operator or whoever answers says, "Oh, that's Bob," and they'll give you Bob's number or transfer you to Bob, whoever that might be. And it's really just that simple to find them. That's how I find them a lot of times.
And as we're finding out in our chat line, also talk to your coworkers, some other agents, because John David put a PDF in the chat line for those in Connecticut, and it breaks down by community. So sometimes your greatest resource could also be your coworkers. So there's just a ton of resources out there. Thank you, John David. And that's all the questions that we have right now.
Okay, great. Well, moving on, getting to get more information on getting to know your clients. You'll want to get to know their risk. Now, property owners in high-risk areas, those would be the zones starting with an A or a V. If they start with a V, that stands for velocity. Those are going to be beach properties, okay? A are going to be more inland properties that are prone to flooding, but they're high-risk areas. Could be followed by a number or a letter in either case. So those are your high-risk ones. In those areas, they stand a 1 in 4 chance of flooding during the normal 30-year term of a mortgage. That's high. That's a pretty – I'll take those odds in Vegas all day long, but that's really a high risk. So that coverage would be required by their lender if they have a lender in those areas, and they're likely to pay higher premiums. Now, your property owners in the low to moderate risk areas, those are the areas that usually start with a B, C, or X. Those are areas where people mistakenly believe they are not at risk for flooding because nobody's making them buy. The lender would not be making them buy in that area. And so they tend to believe that either they don't have any risk or that that somebody else is going to cover it. It must be covered on their homeowners. You'd be surprised at the number of people that think that kind of stuff. So they need to understand that everyone is in a flood zone. Nobody else is going to pay it for them. And they have an option of possibly a preferred risk policy if they meet the loss criteria in those areas, and that can be pretty inexpensive for them. Also, don't forget other insurable options. Talk to your new homeowners. If you write commercial insurance, business owners need to buy flood. A lot of times, especially smaller businesses that suffer a flood without flood insurance, a very high percentage of them go out of business after that because they can't afford to recover from it. So really good idea to talk to them. Renters, condo unit owners, you can sell contents-only coverage. A lot of people don't realize that, but it's cheap. My mother-in-law and I were just talking about it last night, and she doesn't have a whole lot of contents, and so I think it was like $22 for $8,000 worth of coverage. So in any event, good idea to check in those areas too. Now, Heidi, do we have another poll here? Heidi?
Oh, sorry, I was muted and I couldn't get myself unmuted. Yes, we do have another poll.
I thought so.
So let me go ahead and pull up our second poll. In our second poll, we're kind of looking for people who currently have any type of retention plan for their flood policies. So kind of either a yes or no question. Yes, they work with some specific plan that they've come up with to retain their flood policies. A lot of people don't have any type of formal written plan. They just kind of let that process happen naturally. The insured may just renew their policy or not, kind of looking to see where we're at. And right now the winner is no. We've heard from just over half of our people, and the winner by quite a bit right now is no, I don't have a formal plan, and I let retention happen naturally. So I'm going to go ahead and end our poll, and I'll publish our results. So Terry is going to kind of talk to you about specifically the topic of retention. So thank you for sharing that poll with us.
All right. We want to talk about retention. This is another area with building your book of business. Now, I think people think that flood policies just automatically renew, and I guess sometimes they somewhat do if it's being escrowed, if it's required by the lender and it's being escrowed. But honestly, I have seen lenders forget to pay those, and the flood policy lapses, and they don't find it out until there's a loss. And so it's a good idea to check on those. Also, what if your client needs to up his coverage? If he's not at the maximum coverage and his, the value of his home has gone up, the replacement cost of his home has gone up, you might want to keep making sure he pushes that up. So if they are not escrowed, then you definitely want to work those renewals. So I hope you're talking to people at their annual renewals about their coverages, including flood. Make sure they're still on board with it. As you see by number 2 there, policyholders are more likely to have a lapse in coverage during the first 2 years. So I haven't had it for 2 years and haven't had a loss, so hey, why renew it? So you want to keep reminding them of the importance. I can't tell you the number of instances I've heard from agents where somebody bought flood for 10 years and then all of a sudden they decided they didn't need it, and then shortly after that lost their home. I mean, it's not funny. It's really just sad, but I have heard those stories time after time. And so it's important to keep reminding people of why it's important for them to continue to carry that. And so one of the things you might want to do is run a report on your policy renewals or expiration. If on our website, the National Flood Services website, your Flood Pro website, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see a little speedometer-looking thing that says Agent Dashboard. I've had agents write with us for 20 years that never knew that was there. So take a look at that and click on it, because you'll see a series of boxes come up, and you'll see 0 to 15 days, 15 to 30 days, over 30 days, and it tells where your policies are in there. If there's a colored button in that box, you can click on that, and it'll bring you up a nice spreadsheet that will tell you all the details of who those clients are and allow you to work those and see why they haven't paid those. And you may want to address that with a retention plan. Okay? Whoop, too far. There we go. Also, the NFIP actually, I don't know if they do this every year, but they do it some years. I've seen it. I actually got one this year. This campaign this year ran from February to October 2019. And they send out letters and postcards urging people to renew their flood policies. There's also some information and materials available on the FloodSmart website, and you'll see a link to that, agents.floodsmart.gov, servicing/retain-clients. Take a look at that, because there's some materials on there you can use in retaining your, nothing more frustrating than writing it and then just losing it, because people don't see the importance of renewing. So really good idea to adjust that and remind them of that from time to time. So, talking points. What do you say when your insured says, why should I renew my policy? Of course, you want to remind your client that it's not required does not equal not needed. So just because they haven't experienced a flood doesn't mean they never will. Flood can happen to any time, anywhere, to anyone. Take my word for it. I've lived in my house in Houston since 1990. I live in an X zone. I'm not required to buy flood. Of course I do, because I know too much. But we've never flooded. Our houses were built back in the late 70s. I've talked to neighbors that have lived there ever since. Water's never come over our curbs. But I flooded during Hurricane Harvey. So take my word for it. It can flood to anyone at any time. And one of the things you'll want to remember, too, is with pre-firm policies, these would be the policies that were written before your community joined the flood program. Now, those policies get special subsidized rates because they didn't have building codes at the time they were built. But in order to maintain them, they have to maintain continuous coverage. So if you have one of those older customers with one of those older homes, if they allow their flood insurance policy to lapse once for more than 90 days or during 2 or more annual renewal cycles for any number of days, They may be required to provide an elevation certificate and no longer be eligible for those discounted, subsidized rates. And believe me, that can be a real shocker. I've seen, $10,000, $12,000 rates on some of those older properties that were not built properly. So, good idea to look at those things and talk to your customers about that at renewals. So, this is it looks slightly different than this, but this is a landing page on nationalfloodservices.com. So this section is always changing. This is such new information that this changes sometimes daily, possibly every other day. And so these screenshots are a little out of date right now. We need to get new ones daily, I guess, on here, because it has changed a little bit in the way it looks. But the point is, go to nationalfloodservices.com. There's a lot of resources on here. One of the things that I think you'll love if you go to nationalfloodservices.com, you want to go to Tools and click on Risk Assessment, and you will love this. Put a property address in here and see what you get. What's going to happen is it'll give you a risk score. It'll show you the flood map and where that property is located on that flood map. It'll tell you how many flood losses in the community, the number of current policies, average claim amount. Think of how that could be a great sales tool. I just showed this to an agent the other day. He was so excited. He sells a lot of flood, but he was so excited to see this with that flood map and all the statistics and stuff on there. So take a look at that. I highly recommend this screen. As far as education, again, the page doesn't look exactly like this, but as I said earlier, go to nationalfloodservices.com and you'll want to click on the topic that says NFS Elevate. Underneath that, click on Educate, and you'll find lots of education materials there. We've populated this with a bunch of little, they're not webinars, they're little 2 to 5 minute vignettes if you want to, on very topic specific. So when you want to find answers to questions, there may be a 2 to 5 minute little presentation there that you can look at that will answer those questions for you. I really urge you to take a look at those. You'll find some that'll be really, really helpful for you on that. And that's expanding all the time. They're constantly putting new stuff on there and changing this. This is so new. So you're right on the cutting edge of this information for our website. Resources for agents, if you look at Tools and click on Resources, you're really going to love this because you're going to see some marketing letters and postcard and email templates on there that you can use and customize with your name and address information on there so that you can use those for mail outs or email blasts or however you want to use them. There's also some social media tools and infographics to use on there. You can post stuff on your Facebook page or Instagram or whatever you might want to do. To use those resources, and those are yours to use and customize for your purposes. So the key takeaways from this webinar are: in marketing, you want to identify your marketing opportunities, create a plan, build a network of partners and friends. We talked about that. Selling, you want to identify your clients, become the flood expert in your area. You'd be surprised what that will do for you. Retention, keep an eye on renewing flood policies and make sure you work those, see if they need to boost their coverage. Take advantage of retention campaigns and resources. The NFIP, of course, does sometimes, and Flood Smart, you'll see that on there, and the things that we have on the nationalfloodservices.com website. And know the answers to why I should renew my flood policies. And lastly, the resources. We provided a number of resources for you there that should be very helpful to you when it comes to working your marketing plan. So Heidi, do we have any other questions that we need to deal with?
I put a link to a PDF document that is the order form for the NFIP public awareness materials.
Oh,
you will find that NFIP has a lot of very high quality marketing materials that they publish and that you can order free of charge. You do have to plan a little bit ahead of time. They are currently kind of in process of updating some of those materials, but they have just a lot out there. One of the things that the agents that I talk to like a lot, they have stickers that say that you can attach to your regular fire policy that says that policy does not cover flooding. It doesn't have flood insurance attached to it. There's also flyers that you can send out that also say that as well. And again, these are free of charge that you can take advantage of. And so I put that out there as well.
Great, thank you. Now, I'm going to move on to this next screen, but you want to launch our last poll while our agents are able to look at this screen?
I happen